a chair, so co-chairs. For instance, Senator Boucher is the Republican co-chair on the School Safety Subcommittee. The charge was that each of these subcommittees would meet and hold public hearings on the subject. No written bill or proposal before them, but open to the public to say, come in, what's on your mind with regard to school safety, mental health, gun violence. Each of those committees met, in some cases more than once, and held public hearings more than once. Some of those public hearings went to 3:30 in the morning. Some had to be continued into the next day. The Gun Violence Subcommittee, for instance, when they held their public hearing, over 1,500 people came till 3:30 in the morning, and then it was continued into the next day. The Mental Health Subcommittee had very long into the night public hearings, as did the School Safety Subcommittee. Let me take the easier ones first. I say easy as far as emotion, certainly not a subject matter. The Mental Health Subcommittee reported out various things that both the Republicans and Democrats came to agreement on. What they all realized to a person is pretty complex issue. Complex not only obviously in its scope, but also complex with regard to emotion. For instance, there are some people that might say, if you are a doctor, or a psychologist, or a counselor, a mental health professional, and you are dealing with a patient, if that patient says to you, I'm getting crazy thoughts, I have suicidal thoughts, I have vengeful thoughts, I might want to do something, does that trigger you as the mental health care professional to report that person to authorities as a danger to themselves or others? Some people said it should. Other people said, wait a minute, won't we have a chilling effect on people trying to get help if they feel that they're going to be judged by what they say, and something they might say may trigger something? Those were the kind of things, thank you, that raged on in this thing. And it's a small example, folks, of how in a soundbite those things are pretty easy, but in reality they're not. The committee came up with about 6 things they agreed on, and several things they didn't agree on. Section 2, school safety, and I'll turn it over to Tony Boucher.
Our school safety committee was the first committee to actually meet. And what was interesting is that this process was left very open-ended, which meant there was no process in place. So the co-chair and I worked over a weekend to set up a process, and that process ended up being a model for the rest of the committees. And that is, on the first day that we met, we would invite in the morning all the constituents, stakeholders that you can think of. Teachers unions, principals associations, our superintendents associations, our mayors of large cities, and our first selectmen of small towns, law enforcement, university, security guards. And we had them come and bring their very best thinking to us. Then right after that, we opened it up to anyone that wanted to come to a public hearing and give us their take. We had over 100 people. Small in comparison, by the way, to the gun committee, which had over 1,000. But this committee, that was a lot of folks to sign up for something like this in a normally you'll get maybe 50 or so folks that come and testify, 20 to 50 folks in a normal committee. We listened to everyone, and then we also had and convened a compilation of all of what was stated and tried to put together some language around what we could probably put out to the rest of the members on our committee to talk about and see what we can come to consensus on. We also had some informational hearings, and we invited the rest of our committee to hear from some experts. Those that really were in threat assessment world, those that were clinical psychologists that worked on this, and we had some excellent presenters. The chair brought someone that he knew, and I brought someone that had done a great presentation in Norwalk that Representative Cafero attended as well. We thought he would really be well placed, and they worked with schools all over the country and in Connecticut, and knew firsthand knowledge of the various unfortunate other tragedies that had happened in other states. We listened to what they told us, and then we again, took in and had the staff prepare summaries of this, and we met a couple of times and we discussed. We could still be there today if we didn't take one very controversial thing off the table, and that is arming teachers and staff at schools. After listening to what everyone said, not necessarily what we all felt on the issue, but listening to the constituents, to the people that came to testify, about 80% did not feel that that was the right direction to go. 20% might have agreed with it, so we took that off the table, and thereby we were able to come up with about 3 pages worth of recommendations and a half a page of things we could not come to consensus on. We could not come to consensus on if you should add more armed security guards versus social workers in a school. We couldn't come to consensus on certain things that mandated certain ratios at school, but we did come to consensus on the fact that we should have and include in your school construction grants a part of it that would cover security issues and infrastructure improvements, as well as to reignite a 2007 special fund just for security issues like reinforcing doorways, security cameras, different types of windows, various other things, reinforcing the entryways, and other like type of technical things that you can do. The reason that we would have 2 funding streams would be, one, it's your normal process of if a building or improving your school, and it would be the same reimbursement rate. Towns like New Canaan would probably get 21% reimbursement rate. But the other fund would be for if you were not doing anything in your school other than just considering a security item, that could be a fund that any school district could make use of. Again, it wasn't a lot, but it's something to get it started. The other pieces that we talked about were making sure that that you had a security and safety plan that not only was updated, but also approved by the state, and that you should include law enforcement as a member of that. And you can bring in threat assessment experts that you didn't have to pay for. You could use local law enforcement, local police departments, and consider. Now, you can do your own, which many school systems have done, and I think New Canaan as well. You can hire as many security guards as you want, and they could be armed or unarmed, depending on what the local community wants. We also talked about if you do have a very at-risk individual in your school system, that there should be a way not only to make sure that they were followed up with and that they were getting proper treatment, but that people were alerted to that situation. We didn't come to consensus on having a central reporting system or an anonymous system, as some might have suggested would be a good thing. In fact, the security experts actually all thought that was a very good idea. But at the end of the day, we did have 3 pages worth of recommendations. We sent that on, and everyone was quite satisfied that they were very involved in the process. It was not led, and I made that point very clearly to my co-chair, that this wasn't about the chairs leading this, it was every committee member. I had their say, and everything that they had to contribute was a part of that report. And we sent that report just a couple days behind, actually, to the 2 chairs, who are now going to take all of the reports coming forward and make this one bipartisan bill. You should know, however, that other gun bills are going through the regular committee process. Those that are maybe possibly stronger, that may not necessarily enjoy the total consensus of the General Assembly. Those are typically going through the Public Safety Committee, and they're also going to the Judiciary Committee. So the issue isn't over just with a bipartisan omnibus bill. That process can take you right into the last day of the session in the first week of June. But I think that there is some strong support for doing something that we can hopefully all be proud of. It is a very difficult process, but I think this direction that Connecticut is taking is actually a better process, but even New York, that came out first, is finding themselves now in court. In fact, the Supreme Court of New York is considering whether or not some of those issues are going to be considered constitutional or not. So that's an ongoing discussion. Hopefully Connecticut will do better. That's my hope, and there's a lot of us that do feel strongly that we do have to at least have some loopholes closed and a stronger, even though we are one of the top states in the country for our gun laws, as far as them being stricter than many other states. There's quite a few other loopholes and other areas that we can improve on. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to our representative.
Thank you. You did a fantastic. Any questions on school security?
Yeah, just one. When you were not able to reach consensus on some of those things, was it essentially a party split, or did you find that there were a much more mixed bag?
I think that the part, it was, we reduced the tension in the group over time, and I think by the end of it, everyone was really very respectful with each other. And when we got to the non-consensus items, they were mostly along the lines of how much should we require a school system to do and whether it was a financial mandate or not. Many of us thought that a lot of those ideas were actually good ones, but the price tag was so high that we could not impose that given the economic conditions that we have. I think the one where we could have actually fought over substantially was the idea of arming staff or not arming staff. That truly was the
Well, it
most
wasn't
contentious.
partisan, but you,
No, it was not partisan as much as, and you can imagine, usually your local boards of education are not as partisan, and it's also true with the education committee, the legislature as well. The truly difficult area would be in the gun law area. And by the way, the reason that there is a bipartisan committee is that there are as many Democrats as there may be Republicans that may be of different minds on this issue as well. Otherwise, we might not be having a bipartisan committee in this way. It seems to me that the most controversial issues are the ones where they decide to go a bipartisan route sometimes.
Yes, ma'am.
Have there been any of these open hearings in Fairfield County? Because I haven't heard about them, but that may be just me.
There were,
You mentioned open
the
hearings.
public hearings?
Public
Yes,
hearings.
they were, one was held in Newtown, so, I think Newtown's Fairfield County. At the high school, the Newtown High School. That one went on for about 6 hours, about 6 PM to 12 PM. A deference was given to the residents of Newtown to speak first. That took about that 6-hour period of time. When we had the other hearings were held where most of our public, in fact, all of our public hearings, well, some exception, were held at the Legislative Office Building. Yes?
Yes, I'll stand up just because I'm in the front. I wanted to say something about this gun legislation. We haven't really had much of a choice before now on the changes that have been made unconstitutionally. We invited in Homeland Security, which is unconstitutional. All of these changes have already been made. This is without our consent. And what we see happening is there's been lockdowns going on for years, drills going on for years, police state is growing, and nobody's really talking about the Second Amendment, the entire Second
I was gonna
Amendment.
get to that. Let me get, let me
This is
open up the-
like, not one person is discussing the entire Second
Let me
Amendment.
get to
I know-
that. We're just talking about school security. I'm
I
getting
know,
about
but
to
it
do guns.
affects everything, it affects every aspect. If you don't discuss the entire Second Amendment, then you can't talk about any of these things, they're all part of the whole system. And I know that Walter Reddy from Weston has spoken with you, Tony,
Yes.
about this. And the full Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia. Everyone's throwing that part away and just talking about the individual right. No one's talking about revitalizing the well-regulated militia system. That's a cure-all for so many things. It's
define militia.
not the kind that you have.
Define militia in the current.
The well-regulated militia of the several states that was,
Define militia in our current.
we don't have a well-regulated militia.
Right.
What would it be?
Militia was defined differently when
Okay.
it was written.
You know what,
Yes.
we're gonna, if you don't mind, let me introduce the subject as we did mental health and school safety, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
Will I be able to discuss this a little more fully? Because, I can just wrap this up like right now. I just wanted to tell people what resources they can get on this because they're available now. I could just wrap this up, it'll be very quick.
What is it you'd like
Yeah,
to say?
I'm just saying that if the revitalization of the well-regulated militia, there are a couple of books that just came out on the subject, there's going to be a movie on it. Dr. Edwin Vieira, who has 4 degrees from Harvard University, is an expert on money and also Constitution. You must get a copy of a book called Constitutional Homeland Security, and a new book, 2,300 pages on CD, which is only $40 on Amazon, which is called The Sword and Sovereignty. This will tell us how Swiss militia is an operation, and they've been doing beautifully. This cuts across all segments of our society. This is what we need to do, not just for our defense, but for our emergency management. Look at all these crises we've had, these natural disasters, people being left behind by FEMA.
Thank you very much.
We have another meeting to go to.
Ladies and,
Sorry, but we do.
ladies